Hey folks, this is Kelani. As another weekly reset goes by, it should come as no surprise that we have a few new things to talk about. There's some additional info on how the classic WoW demo will work at the convention, and for everyone playing along at home with the virtual ticket, and priests should hopefully be happy to know that their one and only DPS spec is finally seeing some progress in an upcoming PTR patch. From the looks of things, it's buffs across the board, so that should be a few steps forward for the Shadow Priests. Let's just hope they don't take any steps backward right after these buffs go through. I'm wondering how much more we'll really end up hearing about the next patch before BlizzCon rolls around, because we're getting pretty close at this point, and I would assume the dev team will be keeping a lot of info and news pretty hush-hush, so we're all left with a sense of wonder and amazement when we finally actually get around to BlizzCon. Unless, of course, they need to stamp out a few hype fires because things are getting a bit too out of control, kind of like Diablo. I'm still really excited about some Diablo announcements, but I'm really worried after their little rein in your expectations post. I think the main reason we have some new info for the classic demo is maybe for some of the same reasons. I can imagine a lot of folks getting super hyped for this first glimpse of a Blizzard-created vanilla experience. Trying to contain some of that hype might not be too terrible an idea, with all the restrictions being imposed upon the demo itself. So what new info do we have about the classic demo? We kind of know what the scope of the demo will be as far as leveling and zones are concerned. We also have a little bit of information about what parts of classic will remain as they were and what parts of modern WoW are being squished into the mix. Let's start with the scope of the demo. What can we expect from this very brief look at classic World of Warcraft? There's only going to be 2 zones available to play, one for each faction. The Horde will get to experience the Barrens again in all of its true vanilla glory, and the Alliance will be able to drudge through Westfall, keeping an eye out for those Defias pillagers. Those are the only 2 zones available to play in the demo, so you won't be able to run outside of the Barrens or Westfall, assumingly without being kicked out of the game. Well, that's a bit odd though, right? Westfall and the Barrens aren't starting zones. What about the epic nostalgia of leveling from 1 to 6 and then heading off to Goldshire? What about the Wolves? Well, we'll all be starting at level 15. We're getting thrown straight into the mix, which I think is a good thing and a little bit of a bad thing. The only reason I would say it's maybe a bad idea is simply because of nostalgia. Starting up at the Abbey is definitely something I will never forget for my very first character. Having to run around doing errands for pretty much every NPC there made you feel like a foot soldier. You were a real grunt for sure. Those starting areas probably hold a lot of memories for a lot of players, and starting our adventures in this new version of World of Warcraft way into the grind might be a little weird, but those are pretty weak reasons when you consider this is largely for testing purposes. These zones make perfect sense for gathering information about various systems and seeing how everything plays out. At level 15 you have a handful of talent points, and oh boy, if you never played with the old talent trees, that's going to be interesting to adjust to. That's definitely going to be a blast from the past. So there's a few talents to play with. You should also have a larger variety of spells, and you won't have to leave a few spells unlearned to the trainers due to a lack of funds. So hunters will already have their first pet, which would otherwise have been locked to level 10, I believe. Priests will have their Psychic Scream, warriors will have their defensive stance. You're going to have a few buttons to play with, which is really great because if we were all starting down at level 1, we'd literally have 1 button to play with for a few levels, then maybe 2 or 3 by the time you hit level 6. So we start at level 15, we only have the Barrens for the Horde and Westfall for the Alliance, so the adventuring and questing is going to be pretty limited. To tack on top of that, there's also going to be an upper level limit of 19, so you won't be able to grind your way very far, and you won't be able to hit level 20 for some of the cooler abilities for some classes. Apart from that, there doesn't really seem to be any other limits, so you should be able to play any vanilla race and any vanilla class. So sorry for the Blood Elves and the Death Knights, we're going super old school with this one, but that brings up an interesting point. I kind of wonder what will happen to the faction balance. If anything going into vanilla, if people can't play their pretty Blood Elves, will they still want to play on the side of the Horde? I bet a lot of people will be going back to Night Elf or Human Toons. It's going to be exciting to figure out when we can play this all for real, but for the demo I'll probably play around with both factions in as many classes as I can bear. With the 2 available zones being the Barrens and the Westfall, which just and so happen to be 2 of the first zones to have dungeons, you would hope that these dungeons might be playable in the first demo. Give us a taste of how dungeons used to be in vanilla. But sadly neither the Deadmines nor the Wailing Caverns instances will be playable this time around. It's literally just going to be Westfall and the Barrens with the various quests we all know and love. Anything that requires hopping across a river or a bridge or a little lift. Oh my gosh, the lifts at the southern end of the Barrens will be back. It's kind of insane how much the world has changed when you really stop and think about it, but we'll have to wait a little bit longer to play about with any of the other zones. We also know a little bit more about what parts of modern WoW will be creeping into this vanilla recreation. WoW Classic is being built on the foundation of the modern code base, so it's going to be tied to the Battle.net launcher just like every other Blizzard game, and you'll also be able to use the Battle.net chat in-game. There's improved support for widescreen monitors, because let's be honest, who even has a 4x3 monitor anymore? A few of the newer social features like the right-click report player function will be in there to help things keep a bit tidy, and with the game playing on the modern WoW engine, quite a few older pastimes like wall walking or wall climbing won't be returning, which I know has made a few players a little sad. If you hunt around on YouTube for a little bit, you can find all sorts of tricks for getting out of bounds in vanilla WoW, most of which probably just won't work in this new version of classic WoW. And then just in case anyone has any issues with their reds and greens, the updated colorblind mode will also be travelling back in time with us, because apparently the older versions of the colorblind modes were a little lackluster. All of this info is pretty exciting for me, mainly because I want to see what they do with Classic WoW and if it becomes a real success, but there is one more piece of information that was dumped in our laps. The demo is going to have time restrictions, and that's not just the fact it's only going to be available to play for a handful of days, and I do believe it releases on November 2nd when BlizzCon starts. We already knew that, but your actual in-game playtime will be restricted as well. We have no idea how long we'll have to play, but just like the folks who are actually attending the convention, who will only have a set amount of time with the floor demo machines, because I'm sure there's going to be some pretty long lines for trying out this first version of Classic, anyone joining the fun from the comfort of their own homes via the virtual ticket will also get kicked off the game after their time limit is up. So if they decide to start that timer at 15 minutes, that's all you'll have for each play session, and then you'll have a cooldown before you can even get back in again. From there you'll probably have to try and log back in and wait in whatever queue awaits you. I'm assuming we'll all be playing on the same server and they won't have any beefy servers ready to go for the demo, so we'll all get piled into a queue behind the BlizzCon folks and have to wait it out. As people get kicked out after 15 or 20 minutes of playing, the queue will jump a few places and they get to join the very end of it if they want to hop in again to play. It seems kind of lame, but they did also say that if they can relax the restrictions and still have people able to jump in and play, then they'll do that too. I guess it all depends on the server stability, server capacity, and ultimately how many people are trying to log into the demo at any given time, so don't clear out your calendar for those few days to just play through WoW Classic. Firstly, there won't be enough content to actually keep you engaged for more than a few hours tops, and secondly, you'll get booted out every so often anyways. Just after this information was released, the first build for the Classic demo was pushed through to the client, which allows for the typical websites to start data mining everything, so be on the lookout for even more information in the coming days. But that's pretty much everything we know about the Classic demo at BlizzCon. I'm really stoked to play through the content on offer, and I'm still really intrigued to see what Classic WoW is going to look like. I think it has a lot of potential, and not just necessarily as a nostalgia machine. Moving on to our other topic, Shadow Priests will be seeing some much needed love and attention in patch 8.1, as we kind of already knew with the whole "your class isn't finished yet, sorry about that, check back in patch 8.1, we might have something for you then." Well, 8.1 shouldn't be too far away, and we finally have some planned changes for our Void pals. The key changes address a few points. They want to make Void Form more meaningful, allow you to stay in Void Form longer, make actually staying in Void Form for longer matter more, and give the player a few more choices when it comes to extending the duration of Void Form. So instead of Void Form popping up and you go, "Oh yay, I hit a little bit harder than a wet noodle now," you should hopefully see a bit more oomph to that elevated state and stay in it for a bit longer. To actually achieve those goals, Void Form will increase spell damage by 20%, up from 10%, there's the oomph. Insanity drains increased per second in void form will be reduced by 15%, so you can stay in each void form a bit longer, and void bolt insanity generation will be increased by 25%. I wonder how long a void form will be able to go on with these changes. Back in Legion, I remember Shadow Priests would flaunt and boast about how many void form stacks they could get to. Maybe we'll get back there someday if these changes are only the first step. To go along with these void form changes, Shadow Priests will also be receiving a few other buffs to help with their utility, defensive capabilities, and mobility. Dispersion's damage reduction will be increased to 75%, up from 60%, and will also increase your movement speed by 50%. That's going to be pretty huge for those moments when you need to move right now, but you're also in danger of dying within the next few seconds. 75% reduction should also cover a Shadow Priest for all manner of high damage soak abilities, which is really cool. There's going to be a new talent which replaces Mania called Intangibility. This new talent will reduce the cooldown of Dispersion by 25% and cause it to heal you for 50% of your max health over its duration. So cram absolutely everything into Dispersion and reduce its cooldown. That might be a little OP, but I'm sure the Shadow Priest won't be complaining. Shadow Priest will also be getting Focused Will as a baseline passive, just like the other two specs. This passive reduces all damage taken by 15% for 8 seconds whenever you get hit by a melee attack or ability. And the final major change is the PvP talent Hallucinations, which gives various utility spells some insanity generation. That's going to be made into a baseline passive as well, just to make sure you don't get penalized too badly for casting some of those helpful spells now and again. A few talents will also see some adjustments. Mind Bomb and Psychic Scream will take 40% longer to break from damage, making them a little better for actually crowd controlling monsters instead of just interrupting them. Void Torrent generates 30 insanity and deals 20% increased damage, and no longer requires Void Form to cast. Lingering Insanity phase every 3 seconds instead of every 2, and Surrender to Madness will have its cooldown reduced by 33% and penalty duration reduced by 50%. Most of those changes could end up being pretty nice, but that last one really interests me. I know Surrender to Madness was always a love it or hate it playstyle, and I feel like it might have lost a little bit of its craziness now that it doesn't kill you anymore, but in BfA it's fallen completely out of favour. This might be the little change it needs, along with the more impactful and longer lasting void forms, to get our Shadow Priests back to surrendering themselves to the void entirely. I'm trying to think of which boss fights this just really wouldn't work on in our current raid tier. From what I remember, movement would neuter Surrender to Madness pretty quickly, so honestly, Uldir shouldn't be too bad if you get a little lucky, and it's not like Surrender will kill you these days anyway. But that's the Shadow Priest buffs coming to the 8.1 PTR very soon. If you're playing a Shadow Priest or you're interested in playing a Shadow Priest after 8.1, go ahead and give them a little look over. Who knows, you might find your next ult, or maybe even your new main character. And that's it for this little update. I hope you all have a wonderful week and get some awesome goodies from your weekly caches. If you're sticking around for a little longer, what do you think about the info we got from the classic WoW demo? Are the time restrictions something you can get behind, or something you think should never have been considered? What about only having Westfall and the Barrens as playable zones? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.